So yeah, another thing we're talking about, I think, is monoscopic depth cues. So obviously, every shot that we do on a 3D production isn't all about the 3D. You know, it's not always all about getting the maximum 3D out of a shot. But if we are trying to improve the 3D experience, there's a number of things you can do to try and achieve a better shot, and they're worth looking out for in post as well. So these are monoscopic depth cues, ways of perceiving depth, you know, before you add the stereo element. So whenever we're on a shoot, one of the key things is the camera position. And if we can get to choose where to place the camera, it's fantastic. We always prefer to shoot close in on wide-angle lenses. Now, certain situations that's very difficult. In a stadium, for example, you've got fixed camera positions. You're shooting a rugby game, as we did recently during a live transmission, or if you're shooting wildlife, your long lenses very often. And that has the effect of fighting against the sort of natural, voluminous kind of 3D effect that we really like, as opposed to the sort of cardboard cutout you get on long lenses. Other depth cues that we use are, motion parallax, so tracking shots and dollies, fantastic. Those lovely motion parallax effects we get really enhance the depth. And then obviously, lighting and texture and perspective, single point perspective, fantastic. Looking straight down a corridor or something like that always works really well in 3D. So hopefully you'll see that from some of the footage that we shot in this shoot. There's some really nice sort of single point perspective shots and some nice examples of motion parallax as well. I think that about covers everything I want to talk about. But yeah, we'll be around for some Q&A. And Catch myself or Campbell might be on the panel later, not that he knows. And don't forget Mother's Day.
Okay,
Cheers.
Don't go away just yet, because I'm going to let people ask you questions, so you have to stay. No, stay. So has anybody got any questions for Andy? Because I think we should take advantage of his free consultancy while he's here. Luke, here's a question.
I was interested to know why the SI cameras. Like why you chose. I mean, obviously the small unit, it's easy to put in that rig. Yeah. But was there any other considerations? And also, have you found the colour gamut on them?
I think I'll probably leave questions about the colour gamut to people who know a lot more about that subject than I do. I suppose whenever we do a 3D shoot with new cameras, there's always a big learning curve, and it's more painful. We've done quite a bit on Reds, we've done quite a bit on Sony broadcast cameras for the live stuff we do, and quite a bit on SIs. A little bit on the X3s and things like that, but we know we can turn up and the SIs will just work and they're reliable and they'll stay in sync, and it's just a very, very reliable method of shooting. It's bulletproof. And whenever we do a red shoot, you end up one of the cameras getting upset, rebooting it, and then rebooting the other one, and the sync goes out, or the issues of time code, and you've got issues playing back and monitoring, or the cameras are synced, but the monitoring outputs are not synced, and you're rebooting and starting the Gen 10 again to sync them, and it slows things down, basically. So you just get a lot more shot in the day with the SI system. But there are obviously other compromises using the smaller cameras, but it's a nice balance between the higher end of things and then at the other end going down to mini cams, 30-inch chips, which are very, very convenient for shooting in 3D, but obviously compromise on the image quality.
Thank you. Any more questions? Oh.
Hi, Andy. Just going to the SI2K cameras, I did all the data processing for Slumdog Millionaire, which was shot extensively on there. I know you can get good results from those cameras. But I want to ask you about zooming in 3D. Do you zoom in 3D? And that's very difficult to track two zoom lenses or to have them track each other. Or do you just track into the subject?
Yeah, I mean, it's nice to track into the subject, but it's not always possible. Yeah, it certainly can zoom in 3D. Typically, you would... if the subject distances, the closest thing, the furthest thing you can see remain the same distance from the camera, you'd want to change the interaction at the same time, potentially. You do get tracking issues on a lot of lenses, absolutely, yeah, and you can try and fix those, and there's a temperature change and it'll go out again. But you can live with those. You obviously lose some of the frame every time you correct them afterwards, but we can zoom in shot, and we have zoomed in shot a lot. But often what you end up doing is putting zooms on just to speed everything up and using them as variable prime lenses.
Hiya, is that working? I was just wondering, you said that it's you would prefer to use wide-angle lenses, and I was just wondering, is there a problem that you get when you're using something with like a really shallow depth of field, stuff goes out of focus?
Yeah, it's a good question. You'll hear some people say that you really need a lot of depth of field in 3D because you don't know where the view is going to be looking. They could be looking anywhere in the picture. It all needs to be in focus. Now, this is where the sort of subtle art of 3D comes in. Now, there's some shots, if you're on wide scenic type shots and you had a branch in the foreground, you don't know whether they're looking at the tree in the foreground or the mountains in the distance. Yeah, ideally, you probably want everything to be in focus and you want as much depth of field as possible. Also, sort of focus pulls can sometimes be a little bit strange. If you pull focus for the action, we had shots of a chameleon going for a grasshopper, and we tried just to focus pull on a static kind of shot, and it really jarred because your eyes were being forced to go from the chameleon to the grasshopper on the end of the branch for no particular reason. But when you pulled it with the action, it worked. So as long as you don't fight against what the viewer would naturally be looking at, you can have shallow depth of field. You can have complete blown out backgrounds. It just varies from shot to shot. I don't think there's any hard and fast rules. And it's kind of where the art of 3D comes in. I think the only way you're going to get appreciation of it is just to look at a lot of different types of shots and work out what works in each one.
Thank you.
Hi, I was wondering if you had any specific issues when you do the close-ups, like you talked about the chameleon head or really small objects.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, as the geometry gets smaller and smaller and smaller, everything gets much more critical in terms of the alignment of the cameras. So yeah, it's certainly more demanding to set it up when the closer you get. Absolutely. I think any specific issues. I mean, we do get issues sometimes with polarized light and specular highlights and things, but that can happen on lots of different types of shots. The biggest issue we had to get a nice close-up of a chameleon and get some volume in its head and eye sticking out and stuff. You have to really be careful of what you can see in the background, because if you have the chameleon, and there's a background right behind it, you can use all the depth available to create a nice rounded look, a natural look in its head, and it looks fantastic. If you remove that background, you could see 10, 20 meters, you've suddenly got to dial down the cameras. The chameleon's head becomes a sort of cardboard cutout, and the background's is another cardboard cutout. So that's the main thing. And interesting sort of little nuances are things like, if you've got a background, it's a long way away, but it's out of focus, you can sometimes sort of disregard that distance, and you're just dealing with the distance of the head. If it just turns into a sort of green blur in the background, then you can almost just ignore it. But that call as to whether you can ignore it or not is a very, very fine one, because if you can pick out features in the background and you can see them and you've got a decent interactional distance and a nice shape in the head, you'll find that you get huge sort of divergence in the background, and it can be really, really distracting, and it's a paint out job which can be quite painful.
How many extra hours are you taking versus a 2D shoot for a day of 3D? Just as an average, and same in post.
It's difficult because I've been on sort of relatively few 2D shoots recently. Certainly, we like to think that when we're on a shoot, we're not interfering with the camera much at all. So everything's done remotely. All our 3D monitoring's done remotely. All the control, motorization of the rig is done remotely. So we try and interfere as little as possible, and like to think we don't slow it down much at all. So it's certainly not sort of half the speed or anything like that, but it certainly is a little bit slower.